So, Tommy, what led to that bashing on The View?
Well, there is a woman over the weekend who took it upon herself to research my family history in hopes of digging up some kind of a gotcha moment, a gotcha angle to validate illegal immigration and open borders. And what she found was really shocking, guys. She found that my family who came here in the 1800s from Norway and Germany, that they spoke Norwegian and German.
Okay.
And really what she did is prove that my family came here legally, but what she was hoping to do was try to call me a hypocrite for believing in merit-based immigration.
That immigrants come over here and they don't know anything and they're dragging us down because we all come from immigrants, including you, Tomi Lahren.
She talks about low skills. What exactly are her skills?
Her second great-grandmother had been here for 10 years, yet spoke no English. Oh, my gosh. 1930 census says Tommy's 3 times great-grandmother had been here for 41 years and still spoke German. She didn't speak English either. She doesn't even know her own history. She certainly doesn't know this country's history.
I them with DNA, 23andMe, because I cannot believe the detail on your background that they were able to get.
Well, I don't have to. She did all the research for me, so I'm sure my family is very appreciative.
What about Joy saying, though, what are your skills? It's beyond research. It is personal. It is mean.
Well, of course, this is classical Joy Behar, but I would like to ask Joy Behar what her skills are, because perhaps we could swap stories. I know I watch Joy, and she seems like a highly skilled lady, but for her to attack me, that's really interesting. Those in glass houses should not throw stones.
It started like any other episode of The View: Sharp Suits, louder opinions, and the usual political ping pong. But this time, it wasn't just about immigration policies or border security. Things took a sharp turn when one of the hosts came armed with something way more personal: ancestry records. Imagine sitting down for a heated policy debate, and suddenly someone starts throwing your great-great-grandmother under the bus. That's exactly what happened.
What is it about you that bothers him so much?
Well, it's not just me, it's anybody who advocates for merit-based immigration or has an issue with open borders. And again, just like you said, they don't seem to understand that we on the right believe in immigration. We understand that we are a nation of immigrants, and I am proud of my heritage. However, I do believe that the immigration crisis of today is apples to oranges from what it was in the 1800s, when immigrants came to this country legally, were documented, worked for themselves, asked for nothing, and built a life and a family. That has nothing to do with the illegal immigration crisis of today that we must deal with. But they don't want to acknowledge that whatsoever.
In front of a live audience, Sunny Hostin tried to paint her guest, a conservative firebrand, as a hypocrite by digging into her family tree. With an almost smug tone, she called out how her ancestors didn't speak English, pulling out records from the 1800s like it was a courtroom trial.
Folks, I have heard a lot of dumb crap come out of blue states, but this one is a real doozy. Get this, as of January 1st, New Jersey teachers will no longer be required to pass a basic literacy test. I kid you not.
According to Sunny, that somehow proved her guest's stance on immigration was invalid. But here's where things flipped. Instead of panicking, the guest leaned back cool, calm, and completely unbothered. She let the attack roll off and hit back with facts. Her ancestors, she explained, came to America legally. They worked hard, learned the system, and didn't demand handouts. This wasn't a contradiction to her beliefs, it was proof they worked. By the way, before we continue, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us grow and share more intriguing stories. Now let's continue.
I started out at One America News with an 80-something-year-old male boss who called me a bimbo pretty freely. That was a different experience. I went to The Blaze and I worked for Glenn Beck, who I had to end up getting in a lawsuit with because he tried to fire me for saying I was pro-choice when I went on The View. So it's been a different experience at those other networks.
Because what was supposed to be a takedown ended up handing the spotlight to the one person Sunny was trying to embarrass. Sunny thought she had the perfect track. She came in swinging with census data from the 1930s, pointing out that one of her guests' great-great-grandmothers had lived in the U.S. for over 40 years and still spoke German. Then she highlighted another relative who didn't speak English after a decade in the country. It was meant to be a mic drop. But instead of a knockout punch, it turned into a boomerang.
People have to wonder, where does Sunny Hostin get her opinions? Like you said, and it's obviously from her husband. She has to tell her what to say on The View, because without it, she's got nothing up there. She's not very bright. But the problem with her is that she went full racist. She injected skin color into a fairly generic behavior seen in all spouses, regardless of skin color. People marry, they listen to each other, they have something in common with them, they share their political views. She just didn't want to upset her husband by saying her husband makes her do everything, and then she'd have to accuse him of being a racist. Because if he told her that this is what white women do, then he's a racist. You see?
The audience didn't hear a scandal, they heard a history lesson. What Sunny failed to realize is that she was making a case for legal immigration, not against it. These ancestors weren't sneaking across borders. They weren't breaking laws. They were doing what millions of immigrants did back then, arriving legally, building lives, and adapting at their own pace. Back then, English wasn't required on day one, and speaking German after 40 years wasn't a crime. It was just heritage. What made the whole thing even more awkward was how casually Sunny dropped the accusations. Instead of talking about real immigration reform or the difference between legal and illegal entry, she turned it into a weird ancestry roast.
Hostin's obsession with race gets thrown back in her face. Today's video comes to us from Sunny Hostin. Sounds like a town. We're in Sunny Hostin. She was on PBS's Finding Your Roots, a show dedicated to researching celebrity ancestry. For context, Sunny is a staunch supporter of reparations and has made a fortune spewing nonsense about white privilege and racial justice. Well, turns out she's not as oppressed as she claims she is. She's actually the descendant of slave owners from Europe. Here's how she took the news.
It was like watching someone try to win a political debate using a 23andMe report. Meanwhile, her opponent barely blinked. She didn't shout. She didn't get flustered. She used the moment to pivot into policy, calmly explaining that her support for merit-based immigration wasn't about ancestry, was about the rules. And Sunny had just walked straight into that argument, head first. Now here's where things really started slipping through Sunny's fingers. What began as a typical back and forth about immigration laws suddenly felt like a petty personal ambush. The shift was so obvious you could feel the tension rise.
I have a question of my own. Do you lock your doors at home? At your residence, do you have a lock on your door? Do you use that lock?
I do, yeah, I do.
You have an alarm?
And why is that? I mean, you lock your door because you want to know who's coming into your home. It's not because you hate the people outside, it's because you love the people inside. Well, that's what needs to be done with the United States of America. That's why we have a border. We have a right to know who's coming into our country and why. That's what keeps us safe.
One second they were talking about borders and policy, the next it was, your great-great-grandma didn't speak English. It wasn't just awkward, it was bizarre. The whole thing felt like a rerun of a bad reality show. Instead of presenting facts or talking solutions, Sunny veered completely off course. The audience didn't come for a genealogy roast. They came to hear about real issues. But Sunny was too locked in, too convinced that ancestry was her secret weapon. She acted like she had uncovered a scandal, like she had found some lost conservative hypocrisy scroll buried in an old immigration file. But instead of making her guest look bad, she made herself look petty. And while Sunny kept reaching for that viral moment, her opponent stayed on message focused, unshaken, and still smiling.
Why do you think you've resonated with so many people?
I think, in large part, I represent Middle America. So you've got the two coasts, and those individuals seem to kind of just talk to each other. And then you've got all of Middle America right there that's dying to have a voice. They don't really feel like they have one. They're not represented, beyond their communities. So I think they watch me and they say, well, she speaks like I do. She thinks like I do. She seems to maybe get it like I do. And I think that's why it's resonated. And also, I do something very different. There's not a whole lot of young conservative women out there. And so I provide that for a lot of young...
Joy Behar even tried to jump in, throwing in a dig about what are your skills, which only made things worse. The guest fired back quickly, questioning Joy's own skills with a smirk that landed harder than any insult that day. The tone shifted completely. It wasn't about immigration anymore. It had turned into a live daytime takedown, but the taker wasn't winning. The real twist came when the calm guest used the entire attack as fuel. Instead of getting emotional or defensive, she broke it down into a mini masterclass. She explained clearly, and without flinching, that she supports immigration, legal immigration. She said she's proud of her heritage. But she also believes today's situation isn't the same as it was back in the 1800s.
If Democrats really want to die on the hill of bringing back plane loads of criminal, illegal alien gang members...
But you haven't proven that they're criminals.
Please,
that's the problem.
Be my guest.
Honestly, like, look, I will be the first one to say if there is a criminal...
Back then, she said, people came to America legally, worked hard, didn't ask for handouts, and built their lives from scratch. No welfare, no hashtags. No activist networks waiting with open arms, just grit, paperwork, and determination. That's what her ancestors did, and in her eyes, that's the big difference. Meanwhile, Sunny just sat there stone-faced as her own argument started crumbling. What was supposed to be a big gotcha moment only ended up proving the other side's point. No one cared that someone's great-great-grandmother didn't speak English. What mattered was that she followed the law and contributed. It was like watching someone bring a wooden sword to a policy fight. Sunny wanted it to be emotional. Her opponent made it factual. She wasn't rattled. She didn't yell, not even a single raised eyebrow. Just a smooth, confident shift from personal attack to political argument. And suddenly the crowd wasn't laughing at her, they were starting to lean in. And just when you thought it couldn't get more embarrassing for Sunny, the internet stepped in and it lit up like a wildfire. Social media exploded. Memes popped up within hours. Clips of the moment spread across Twitter, Facebook, and even TikTok, with people reacting like they had just witnessed a live TV knockout. But the most brutal hit didn't come from a meme. It came from Fox News' Greg Gutfeld. He saw the whole exchange and wasted zero time turning Sunny's ancestry obsession into a comedy monologue. He mocked the idea that someone who hadn't even done a deep dive into her own family history was suddenly the unofficial genealogist of The View. His sarcasm was sharp. He pointed out that Sunny acted like she had just uncovered a political scandal when all she really found was a couple of census lines written in German. And then, just to twist the knife, he brought up something Sunny definitely wasn't expecting. On a past episode of Finding Your Roots, Sunny herself found out that she's a descendant of European slave owners. Yeah. The same Sunny who spends a lot of airtime talking about reparations, racial privilege, and systemic oppression, turns out her ancestors weren't exactly oppressed. The irony was almost too perfect. While Sunny was trying to shame someone else for family history, hers turned out to be way more controversial, and the internet loved the twist. Suddenly, her entire attack didn't just fall flat, it boomeranged right back at her, 10 times harder. At this point, Sunny wasn't just losing the argument, she had become the argument. What started as a dig at someone else's background turned into a public lesson in hypocrisy. The guest didn't even need to fight back. She just let the facts do the work. And she didn't let the moment go to waste. She used the spotlight to double down on her message. Legal immigration matters, borders matter, and throwing ancestry into the conversation to score cheap points is not how adults debate. While Sunny was reaching for a viral moment, the guest turned it into a campaign-ready clip-com, composed and all about policy. But this was no longer just TV drama, it had become a cultural flashpoint. Viewers were split down the middle. One side applauded Sunny for digging deep, claiming she brought context to the discussion. The other side slammed her for making it personal and dragging someone's dead relatives into a modern debate. And here's the craziest part. Sunny had no idea this was going to backfire so hard. She thought she was pulling a bold move, a clever hit, but instead, she delivered the perfect opening. The guest didn't flinch, didn't stutter, just steered it all back to the real issue. And Sunny? She was left standing in the middle of a mess she created, with everyone watching, and not in the way she had hoped. Now, here's where the story takes another wild turn, because just when the internet was done roasting Sunny, she got hit with another reminder that digging into ancestry might not be the best strategy when your own roots aren't exactly clean. See, after her own appearance on Finding Your Roots, Sunny had publicly reacted with shock. She admitted she had always identified as Puerto Rican, never knowing that her family line included European slaveholders. Her exact words? She was in shock and never expected that, but the damage was already done. Suddenly, the woman accusing someone else of not understanding history was caught in a whirlwind of her own history, and it was far from flattering. Meanwhile, her opponent used that exact moment to slide back into the spotlight. She didn't attack back. She didn't insult. She just leaned into her brand. Logic over feelings. Policy over drama. While Sunny's side was busy trying to turn the conversation into a racial debate, the guest reminded everyone what the real issue was: merit-based immigration, national identity, and border control. It was almost poetic. Sunny tried to personalize the topic, but in doing so, she made herself the story, and that was the fatal mistake. Because when you're sitting at a table full of cameras and your facts don't line up with your feelings, someone's going to notice, and that someone is usually the internet. Things were spiraling fast. Producers at The View probably wished they could cut to commercial as Sunny sat there trying to recover, but the damage was done. The guest leaned harder into her core. Message legal immigration is good, emotional manipulation is not. And whether people agreed with her politics or not, you couldn't deny her control of the room. She didn't interrupt. She didn't raise her voice. She sat like a statue of calm while Sunny's argument collapsed under its own weight. The audience wasn't cheering. They were confused. What had started as a political discussion had turned into a weird, personal attack based on family records from over a century ago. Viewers were split, but one thing was clear: the guest gained momentum. Supporters praised her for staying cool and focused. Critics of Sunny said she crossed a line, taking a legitimate topic like immigration and dragging it into gossip territory. This wasn't fighting for justice, they argued. It was just daytime TV drama. And in the background, Twitter was melting down. Some people were defending Sunny's Ancestry comments as brave, while others were calling it a desperate low blow. But the loudest voices were saying the same thing. When you make a debate personal and the other person turns it back into policy, you lose. And that's exactly what happened. Sunny tried to dig up dirt, but instead, she planted a platform for someone else. Now imagine if the roles had been reversed. If the guest had brought up Sunny's ancestry on national TV slave-owning ancestors, European roots, the whole thing there would have been outrage, cancellation campaigns, angry monologues, and a 10-part podcast series blaming everything on racism and colonialism. But since it was Sunny going after someone else's family tree, it was framed as context. That double standard didn't go unnoticed. Commentators and viewers started asking the obvious. Why is it okay to attack one woman's heritage but off-limits for the other? And that's where the whole situation got even more twisted. This wasn't just about two women clashing on TV. It exposed how personal and emotional politics has become, how quickly people abandon the actual issue to chase shock value. Instead of debating border laws, people were arguing over dead relatives and census data. The guest never even needed to destroy Sunny. Sunny did that herself. She walked into her own trap, weaponized ancestry, and turned a serious topic into a personal takedown that blew up in her face. Meanwhile, her opponent didn't get loud, didn't get rattled, just stayed on message, using the moment to push her core beliefs. And when the show ended, it wasn't Sunny's point that people remember it, was the fact that she tried to win an immigration debate using family tree drama. And she lost. On her own stage, in front of her own audience. And just when the internet was done roasting Sunny, the entire segment became a perfect example of how political conversations are no longer about finding answers, they're about scoring points. The View, instead of being a place for real dialogue, had turned into an emotional gladiator pit where the louder you scream, the more screen time you get. Sunny didn't just lose the room, she lost the thread. What could have been a smart, nuanced conversation about how different immigrant journeys shaped America turned into a personal attack filled with contradictions. She could have talked about how assimilation is complex, how language barriers are real, how every generation adapts differently. But she didn't do any of that. She aimed for humiliation and missed. Badly. Meanwhile, her guest didn't even have to fight dirty. She kept repeating her central message like a mantra. Legal immigration works. Borders matter. Merit matters. And if you want to be taken seriously, personal digs in 19th century census records aren't how you get there. Off-screen, viewers were posting side-by-sides of the two women, red-faced and stumbling over ancestry trivia, the other calm, clear, and practically glowing in front of a train wreck. On Twitter, the hashtag war had already started. People were posting screenshots, arguing over who won, but if you actually watched the segment, it wasn't hard to see the power shift. The one who got attacked walked out looking stronger. And let's not forget the quiet part. Sunny's attack didn't just backfire, it lit a fuse. It reminded people that double standards in media are very real. If a conservative host had done what she did pulling out records about a liberal co-host's ancestry, using race or language skills as a weapon, it would have been headline news for a week. But since it was Sunny doing it, the silence was louder than any applause. In the aftermath, the message was clear. If you're going to weaponize someone's past, you'd better make sure your own house isn't built on shaky history, because the internet will find it. And when it does, you won't get to control the narrative. You'll become the headline, the meme, the trending topic, and not in the way you planned. And that's what made this moment stand out. Not just the drama, not just the back and forth, but the fact that one woman tried to bury someone with a story and ended up writing her opponent's victory speech instead. So, what did we really just watch? It wasn't a debate. It was a performance, a political version of Real Housewives, with better lighting and worse arguments. One woman came ready with ancestry records and emotional jabs. The other came with talking points, policy focus, and the patience of a statue. Sunny wanted the viral clip. She got it, but not the one she imagined. Instead of delivering a knockout, she handed her opponent a free campaign ad. And let's be honest, the internet is brutal. When the dust settled, it wasn't the gotcha moment that people remembered. It was the calm, surgical way her guest turned the whole thing into a lesson about legal immigration, personal responsibility, and knowing your facts before you open your mouth. And that line about locking your doors, it echoed through social media like a warning shot. Not hateful, not extreme, just simple, clear, and hard to argue with. While Sunny stumbled over identity narratives, the other woman made her case without breaking a sweat and without once needing to scream or interrupt. So, no, nobody won in the intellectual sense. But in the battle of public perception, only one person walked away with more support than she started with. Sunny ended up looking petty and unprepared. Her guest looked sharp, focused, and unbothered. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to this channel. Also, drop your thoughts in the comments. See you on the next one.